Hello, and welcome to week 49 of our 2 year Bible study. We are in the midst of the book of Proverbs and really right in the middle section of it, which talks about exceptions to the rules. We have gone over the women of wisdom and folly in the first several chapters, and then in our last summary, went over the actions and consequences with a strong focus on God establishing a good life. And now in chapters 16 and onward, we're going to start talking about the exceptions to the rules with a strong focus on the king judging well. So there's really a shift of focus when we get to chapter 16, where it begins to focus on character or the type of people who do certain things. So wise people do certain things or have certain characteristics. Foolish people do other things or have different characteristics. And we see that already beginning in Proverbs chapter 16. In Proverbs 17, we see the outcome of those who follow wisdom or folly. And then in chapter 18, it just notice the differences between the wise and the foolish person within these verses. When you get to Proverbs chapter 19, we again are taking a look at wise and foolish people in their character. But I did want to spend a little bit of time in Proverbs chapter 20 in verse 12. You notice that Proverbs 20, verse 12 talks about ears that hear and eyes that see. The Lord has made them both. And oftentimes Jesus would say, as we're going to see when we get to the Gospels eventually, he has a statement that he says, those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, let them hear and let them see. And I think he could very well be referring back to this particular verse where he talks about the Lord has made you to hear, the Lord has made you to see. But if you have wisdom, you'll be able to hear what Jesus is saying. If you have wisdom, you'll be able to see what he is saying. And wisdom comes through that fear of the Lord. So if wisdom comes from God, Jesus is really making a deity statement here as well, where he's not only saying you need wisdom to understand what I'm saying, but he's saying, I am the one who has made both the ears and the eyes for them to hear and see the wisdom that is being given. I also want to take a look at verse 21, which says, an inheritance that is claimed too soon will not be blessed at the end. And this might have been one of the passages that would come up in the people's mind when Jesus was giving the parable of the prodigal son who takes his inheritance too soon. And then, of course, we see him come to ruin. And probably at that point, that's where everyone expects the story to end. But of course, the son remembers how he had it so much better in his father's house, but couldn't go back as a son, obviously, because he's already taken his inheritance and squandered it away. And so he'll go back and ask to be a servant or a slave of his father. And again, this is probably still not blessed at the end that verse 21 talks about. Of course, the father has been waiting and watching for his son. When he sees him, even from a long way off, comes and runs out. I mean, that would be unthinkable to do. And won't have anything to do with hearing about this enslavement or servanthood of his son. It's his son, and he rejoices that his son is back. And so, from a mindset of the Jewish people listening to Jesus' parable, they would think that the son coming back and being the servant or the slave, that would be the fulfillment of verse 21. And yet Jesus takes it into an unexpected realm when he creates this gracious acceptance back of the prodigal son. So perhaps some of that might have been going through the minds, or perhaps even part of the basis of Jesus starting out that parable. Well, in Proverbs 21, we have a continuation of the characteristics of the wise and the foolish that bleeds over into Proverbs chapter 22. In verse 6, we have a proverb that is very well known to most of us probably: start children up or start children off in the way that they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Or raise up a child in the way that they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. What's interesting is we presume that the way they should go presumes, because of the book of Proverbs, that this is the fear of the Lord. And it could be a very positive proverb in that way. But not a rule, by the way. We talked about how Proverbs aren't rules, they are normatives. So for parents who bring up their children fearing the Lord, then many times, even when the children are old, they don't turn from it. Doesn't mean that there aren't children who turn from the Lord, even if they are raised well. And so we cannot necessarily determine whether parents have raised their children well or not based on the whims of their children. But this also, verse 6, could be a very negative verse. Start children off in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. So if you raise up children not to be following the Lord, um, to have all sorts of sinful characteristics in our life, that's also going to make it hard for them to turn from in the future. Now, again, that doesn't mean that if you've had a hard life, that you can blame all of it on your parents. Certainly, parents are responsible for the relationship that you have with them early on in life. But at some point, the responsibility becomes twofold, and so our paths are not set by what our parents have done, either for good or for bad. And so verse 6 can actually be taken two different ways, and we oftentimes don't think of it that way. And then also in verse 17, it talks about how pay attention and turn your ear to the sayings of the wise, apply your heart to what I teach. This really begins a new section on 30 sayings of the wise. And so each section is probably highlighted in your Bible through headings, but it's still looking at the character and the types of people who follow wisdom or folly. The 30 sayings continue in chapter 23, and then chapter 24 concludes the 30 sayings at verse 22, and then adds some additional proverbs at the end of it.